Once you've connected with someone on a spiritual level, you can't go back to cheap sex.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Decoding TV bonus episode. I am David Chen. Joining me to discuss this week's episode of The White Lotus, she is deputy editor and film critic at Laney Gossip, Sarah Marrs. How's it going this evening?
Good. How are you?
I am well. Last week we talked about how there was gale force winds in Colorado, where I'm recording this, and today, as we're recording this, there's gale force winds in your area. So if you hear some clattering or something like that, we'll try to minimize, but just letting people know that's what's going on.
It's springtime in the U.S., so the weather is crazy.
Indeed. Well, we are here to talk about White Lotus Season 3, Episode 6 tonight. Before we get to that, though, I want to talk about a couple of quick follow-ups from last week. Now, one of the things that happened in last week's episode of The White Lotus was Sam Rockwell met up with Walton Goggins and delivered a monologue to end all monologues. Incredible performance. The whole internet has been buzzing about it. We tried to unpack a little bit about what we thought it meant here on Decoding TV. And we got this very lovely email from someone named Alex who wrote into us at decodingtv@gmail.com. Alex writes in, big fan of the pod. I've been listening on and off since Andor, and I wanted to chime in to share some thoughts on Sam Rockwell's monologue. While I do think there's a lot of truth to Sarah's claim, and I do actually, before I continue reading, I want to point out that this email was subject line, a trans woman's perspective on Sam Rockwell's monologue. While I do think there's a lot of truth to Sarah's claim that his monologue is less about the character's gender or sexuality than it is about how he's a cautionary tale of trying and failing to fill a void, I do still think there's something to be said about how frequently us trans women have heard some version of this monologue before. If you go on Grindr as a trans woman, there is no shortage of cross-dressing sissy on the down low who can't host messaging you about this very same thing, looking to use you as some kind of free therapy to talk through their feelings. As my friend said when we were discussing this scene in the episode, Mike White understands the hold that vaguely gay shit has on the American male psyche better than anyone else in the game. So while, yes, I do think it's possible it's not really about gender or sexuality, I don't think it's all that probable. The scene almost perfectly captures all the mental gymnastics so many men go through to allow themselves to explore their sexuality outside of traditional heterosexuality, because somehow all of the things Rockwell describes doing are somehow less emasculating to them than simply admitting they're into men, or potentially they're not even a man at all. Maybe it's a case of a thing can be two things, but I took it to mean that Rockwell's character would much rather simply abandon any attempt at genuine sexuality and human connection than reckon with his own internalized homophobia / transphobia / whatever you want to call it. Simply put, he's afraid of not being a cisgender straight man, and religion is yet another coping mechanism, which would fall in line with what seems to be this season's theme of Westerners looking to Eastern spirituality / religion as a quick escape from their own troubles, end quote.
That is a really excellent read. And it is worth noting that Mike White is a bisexual man. So he has a window into the world of straight men and gay men and how straight men react to gay men or bi men or men whose sexuality in any way veers from hardcore hetero cisgender. And I think that's a really, really interesting read, that it's that he's just using Buddhism and his sobriety and celibacy in that path as another way to try and fill this void in his life instead of accepting himself. And that's, I'm not sure we're going to get enough of this character to fully know if that's the case, but I do think it's a great read, and it just keeps so many doors open. I really felt the minute Sam Rockwell walked in that he was coming in from another show, and I sort of want to follow him back to that show, because I would like to know, like, are you using Buddhism as just another thing to fill this void you feel inside yourself, or is it truly healing something? Like, but I just don't think we're going to get enough of the character to know. So we're going to have to live with the ambiguity. But I think this is an excellent and interesting read on the character and how he fits into the larger thematic tapestry of the season.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us at decodingtv@gmail.com. All right, moving on. There's one other follow-up from last week's episode that I wanted to mention, and that is Jason Isaacs We talked last week about his comments about how there's double standard when you talk about male nudity versus female nudity. I thought you, Sarah Marrs, made some great points about that. Shortly after we recorded that episode, Jason Isaacs walked back his comments. I don't know if you saw this. But he said, quote, the internet was having fun with whether I was wearing a prosthetic in my nude scene, and so was I, but I wanted to avoid that being the only thing that I was ever asked about in connection with Mike White's brilliant series, as it has been with other actors. So I thought maybe I would just bat away the question with a joke if it came up. If it came up, when so many people were insistent, it seemed weird and inappropriate that what they were actually insisting on was that they and the public really needed to know whether they'd actually see my real penis or not. So bizarre. The point I then wanted to make, but made badly, is that women have been exploited and exposed and treated wildly inappropriately on and off screen forever. And even then, I'd never witnessed any woman being grilled so specifically about their genitalia. I shouldn't have invoked any actresses or used the phrase double standard, which was just poor phrasing. There's long been a double standard around nudity in film, and it's not men who've suffered from it. In fact, it's something that the White Lotus has been correcting. Somehow it either came out wrong or was misinterpreted. He concluded by saying, either way, I'd say to anyone still bothered, please just enjoy the show. Literally none of it's real, and there's bigger and better shocks coming. End quote. So I thought that was nice. Just kind of he's like obviously was probably a little imprecise in his language, and I think we actually broke down both elements of that statement in our conversation last week about it. So anyway, wanted to follow up. Finally, I'm going to be a little bit annoying and just mention one other thing. Like this is a very common thing that happens in a lot of TV shows and films. And I'm sure it annoys people when I bring it up, but I'm going to do it anyway because it gives me a little delight. And that is, I don't remember if it was last week or the week out before that. I'm pretty sure it might have been last week's episode, but basically the episode where the ladies go to the nightclub, right? I think that was last week's. And they all start doing a toast, right? And the guys try to teach the ladies how to do a toast in Russian. And they kind of like stumble a little bit over the words. And then Michelle Monaghan is trying to imitate it. And she says, like Shia LaBeouf, right? Remember she says Shia LaBeouf. I am really curious, Sarah Marrs, in the White Lotus universe, who starred with Shia LaBeouf in the 2008 sci-fi thriller Eagle Eye? Because in our universe, it was Michelle Monaghan who is his co-star.
It's an actress named Nichelle Donahan who bears a striking resemblance to Jackie What's Her Chops.
Maybe is it? Do you think like this universe of the White Lotus has no Michelle Monaghan, and it's just Jacqueline that is the Michelle Monaghan person in the universe? Anyway.
Unless they explicitly acknowledge it, I always assume that the real actor does not exist in the fictional universe.
I think that's
Hot
right.
Tub Time Machine exists in the MCU, but Sebastian Stan does not. Unless and until they do a bit. Because like the Oceans franchise did a whole bit about how Julia Roberts' character looks like Julia Roberts.
Yes.
So it can happen. But unless they do that kind of thing, I just assume this person, the real person, doesn't exist in the fictional universe.
Yeah, I think that's right. So
maybe Jackie co-starred in Eagle Eye.
That's what I'm saying. She is. There is no Michelle Monaghan in White Lotus, but like
Jackie.
There's a Jackie that like had the same career as Michelle Monaghan, right? So
except
but then she would have known who Shia LaBeouf was. Anyway, go ahead.
I cannot cite my source because I forget where I heard it. But somebody said Michelle Monaghan is doing a great Jennifer Aniston on the White Lotus. And now that is in my head, that's all I see. And we know she's a TV star and she's very famous and successful.
Yeah.
And it's it's the hair especially that I'm like, oh yeah, she is just kind of doing Jennifer Aniston. So maybe Jacqueline's career is more Jennifer Aniston.
Yes. She's taking a break at the White Lotus in between seasons of the morning show.
But also having been the star of a huge successful TV show at some point in her past, because she's like in her 40s or around 50. So she's had time to do multiple things.
Indeed. Anyway, just some fun follow-ups from last week. Okay, let's talk about season 3, episode 6 of the White Lotus, Denials. Sarah Marrs, overall thoughts on the episode.
I really like it. The roller coaster is speeding downhill. All of that momentum we've been building, it's all coming out. Things are happening. Realizations are being made. People are stirring the pot. Like it's all happening. This episode also has such a beautiful moment with the Buddhist monk that I think is one of the stellar I don't think it'll get as much attention as Sam Rockwell's monologue because it's not as sort of like jaw-droppingly out of nowhere. But I thought his conversation with Timothy was such a beautiful moment and had such a beautiful concept of life and death that was really nice.
I enjoyed the episode as well. I started the couple episodes of this podcast ago talking about how, it's really great that every episode of The White Lotus is like a full day in these people's lives. That is basically completely broken at this point because, we got, we didn't get to night in this episode. And, the timing is now all like time shifted. I'm really frustrated we didn't get to see that dinner at Gary Gregg's house. Really looking forward to that. But otherwise, fun episode. Some interesting developments occur, and as you indicate, things really start to accelerate in a very occasionally unfortunate, occasionally terrifying way. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about what actually happened this episode. We're going to spoil everything in this episode of The White Lotus. In the final 3 episodes, we're starting the downhill sprint. In White Lotus Season 3, the darkness is closing in. Timothy's suicidal ideation continues to graphic effect as he imagines the immediate aftermath of his choices on his family. I'm just going to stop here and say Sarah Marrs didn't love that. There's all this fantasizing about, Timothy's having a dream sequence. Oh, he's having a dream sequence of shooting himself. Cheap, I have to say, cheap way of creating shock in the audience. You're better than this, Mike White. That was my reaction to the opening scene of this week's episode. Sarah Marrs, do you have the same negative reaction as I do?
Not entirely, because if Timothy actually does die, whether by his own hand or as part of the shooting that we know is coming, I was like, it would be interesting if he imagined his family having this hysterical reaction and then it actually happens and they're just like, oh no. That would sort of pay it off in a way that I think would be fun and interesting and very dark.
Yes. Well, I think what's clear is whenever a show or movie shows you something like a dream sequence, we know that something like it will likely not actually happen in the story, because otherwise they wouldn't have shown you the dream sequence.
Yeah. Although Timothy dying in a terrorist attack on a 5-star resort would be one way for the Ratliffs to get out of that financial situation.
That is technically true, what you're saying.
There would be nobody to charge. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, that raises this prospect of there have been many instances in the past where somebody who has what's his name? The Enron guy, right? I don't want to get his name wrong, but basically the guy in charge of Enron, or was it Bernie Madoff? It was one of those big guys.
It was the Enron guy. I believe it was the Skilling guy because he was the brother of the longtime meteorologist in Chicago. I don't think he was the CEO. I think he might have been the CFO or somehow in charge of money. And he did die by suicide. And I mean, it just all kind of went away. So
I think that's correct what you're saying. But also people who are committed of these or found guilty of these incredibly intense financial crimes, they often commit suicide.
That's going back a long ways. That's 20 years.
Yeah. Sorry, that's a deep cut. Anyway, but suffice to say, many of these people who find it easier to for themselves and their loved ones, that the circumstances are quote unquote better if they off themselves.
I do generally think it's all a dream is always cheap. Yes. I think it's always an easy out of a difficult thing to think about or to portray or whatever. But I do think we still have 2 more episodes. We do not know what's going to happen. And there's a chance that Mike White might use that as a piece in a thing an hour or 2 away from now. So we'll just, there's ways to pay things off that make them work. But just as a one-off in this episode, I was like, oh, it's all a dream. Okay.
Yeah. Pretty irritating. I don't like it when that happens. But yeah, we'll see if that pays off in any way. Later, Timothy, Victoria, and Lachlan accompany Piper to the Buddhist meditation center, where Timothy talks to the monk in charge, who shares an interconnected view of life and death that visibly moves Timothy. And Piper and Lockie decide to spend the night at the center. Elsewhere in the Ratliff family, Saxon comes to grips with his threesome with Chloe and Lachlan. So, we got to talk about this, Sarah Marrs.
Do we,
I have to
though?
say, okay, this stuff, I like the way this information is revealed. I actually thought was good. Like the having a dream sequence about the murder suicide. Like I'm not a fan of that. But like first they show you like a memory of Lachlan and Chloe in bed together, and it seems as though Saxon is lying in bed, pleasuring himself like next to them, which is already pretty troubling. But then later you find out, as the episode goes on, that it's actually Lachlan that was pleasuring Saxon in bed. So the show really went there. And yeah, I guess what's your reaction to that, Sarah Marrs?
I mean, from the first episode, we knew this family does not have healthy boundaries. Saxon was being inappropriate with his siblings. He's too interested in their sex lives. This was it was very foreshadowed that something like this was going to happen. I actually think, like, of all the disaster scenarios, I was catastrophizing for Lachlan going out with his brother to party in Thailand. I'm like, I mean, they both went home alive. Like, this isn't the worst outcome I imagined. I think it was really well done that we assume so much about Saxon all the way through the series. And then this episode, he realizes right away something inappropriate happened. You know, he
Right.
wakes up naked with his younger brother, who is also naked, and is immediately like, oh no, what happened? And throughout the episode, he is thinking about that night and coming to realize that it was Lachlan who was getting him off. I'm a little bit like, Saxon, when it was clear your brother was going to have sex with the French lady, why didn't you leave the room? Again, boundaries. They need them.
To be fair, he was on an unknown drug. But I think here's my question for you, Sarah, is do you think that Saxon is legitimately bothered himself by it, or is he just bothered that people will know about it and tell other people about it? You know,
No, I
because
think he's legitimately bothered by it. I think he's legitimately like, that was a red line. I think in his mind, he thinks joking about Piper being a virgin and Lachlan needs to get laid and all of that. I think in his mind,
and masturbating to pornography in front of his brother, like
I think in his
like
mind, those are all like jokes, or
Uh-huh.
especially regarding Lachlan. I think he imagines himself as setting some kind of standard for his younger brother to follow. And we do see again in this episode, Lachlan being a little bit torn between his two siblings. Like, he's gone out and partied with Saxon and this thing has happened. And then now he's going to the monastery with Piper, and that's like the other side of him. So we continue to see that duality where he hasn't really chosen his path yet. But I do think Saxon is legitimately realizing something has happened that should not have happened, and it's not good that it happened, and I can't undo it. Which it might be the first time in Saxon's life that he's ever had that thought, that there's a consequence to this, that he cannot, like, his, even if nobody ever knows except for him and Lachlan and, you know, Chloe, who doesn't seem like she'd probably say anything. Even if nobody ever knows, if Piper never finds out, if nobody ever finds out, his relationship with Lachlan will always be different. And I think he's realizing I think throughout the episode, it is Saxon making those realizations in real time. And on the other hand, like, the heel turn of Lachlan, you know, he's such a little innocent baby, a little deer in the woods. And then it's like, I mean, he was fully participating in that also. So there's something wrong with Lachlan too. Piper might be the only one, question mark.
I'm going to put this out there that I think for Saxon, probably the loss of control of his body and autonomy is probably something that is equally scary to him as the idea of him actually jerking off or getting jerked off by his brother. You know, he had this whole code of like, I never take drugs, I am the drug, right? Like and so the idea that he blacked out, I think he probably rarely does that, is my guess. Like, I think there's probably a kind of asceticism, body optimization. I'm going to like refine my body and not put alcohol and drugs into it. You know, I'm drinking shakes all the time. Like that, the idea that he lost control is probably just as terrifying to him as that he committed an act of incest.
Well, and I wondered if he felt, I hesitate to use the R word with it, but like I wonder if he felt violated to an extent that that when he thought it was a woman, getting him off while his brother's having sex next to him, that's still weird and inappropriate and shouldn't happen. Your siblings should not be involved in your sex life in any way, shape, or form. But it's I wonder if he thought that was one thing, and then just realizing it was Lachlan, I wonder if that felt like a violation in a way that not only is he dealing with the loss of control of, oh, I took this drug, I got drunk, I blacked out. That's one level of control. But there's also the violation of somebody did something to my body that I did not want them to do. And maybe that he didn't really even fully consent to doing because he was in a blackout state when it was happening.
The only other thing I want to mention about this subplot is I do think. Tell me if you following this, Sarah, or if I'm just reaching, too far, as it were, to use a phrase, turn of phrase. Like there is a lot of pornographic fantasies involve like stepsisters or sisters or people who are related to each other in some way. And I do find it interesting that basically this is a prestige TV drama that's like playing out what that would actually look like, and it's horrifying and it's upsetting, and I just think that there's almost a subversive aspect to it being a subplot in this season of the White Lotus.
Maybe they're full brothers. They're not step brothers.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Do you remember that when they made the Brady Bunch movie in I'm gonna say late 90s, early 2000s, there was a whole subplot where the oldest son and daughter is that Peter Brady and who's the Jan? I forget her name. Christine Taylor played her, but they have like a whole little crush on each other in that movie, and they're step siblings, and they have a whole little crush on it. And that was a family-friendly comedy that incorporated step siblings having a crush on each other. I mean, obviously it's in the Royal Tenenbaums too, but in the Royal Tenenbaums, they acknowledge we can't do this. This cannot be. We just have to love each other silently from a distance because, I mean, they're step siblings, but it's like we can't add this to the mix. Our family's fucked up enough. It's I don't know. I think it's just very like this. I think it's just the furthest down the line you can take. This family is so messed up. They have everything. They have money. They have influence. They have status. Assuming they have power, or at least Timothy has power. And Saxon's just a disaster human. Chelsea straight up says to his face, "You are soulless," and he looks gutted when she says that to him. I don't think Saxon has ever looked in the mirror and thought of himself as anything less than like an A+ human. And now something has happened that has made him feel outside of himself. It has made him feel strange, makes him feel bad in a way that he's probably never felt bad before. And Chelsea straight up saying to him, "You are soulless." And the look on Patrick Schwarzenegger, that moment of acting, the look on his face is you can just see that like Saxon's self-image is just deteriorating right there.
Well, what's amazing about that line is she says it so glibly, like she's not even trying to destroy his world or anything. She's just like, "Oh yeah," like she states it very matter of factly, and there's really no good comeback for anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Like if somebody says that to you, what do you say to that? Like I have a soul, like it doesn't. It really does a great job of reducing down. One of the things I also like about this season is I think the Patrick Schwarzenegger performance is so good. People just think that's the guy. You know what I mean? Like people just think that's who he is. And in fact, as far as we know, that's not the type of person he is. He seems like a very pleasant and fine young man online. But
I do think it's hilarious that Banana Republic is fully selling a tie-in line of clothes with Patrick Schwarzenegger as the model. It is literally Banana Republic and the White Lotus collaborating on a capsule collection. And I'm like, I do not think you want, did you see a script? Do you know who is I would rather Walton Goggins be modeling, because I will wear his weird little goggle glasses because they just look cool. He makes everything look cool. I'm like, Saxon is such a nightmare. But in a Republic, did you know what the character was when you agreed to have him be the face of this campaign?
Do you want to wear the same clothes that Saxon was wearing when he made out with his brother? Like, the answer for many people is yes.
I have to say, in terms of costuming this season and enviable clothes, I feel like there was some enviable clothes in season 1. There were more in season 2. I feel like there are outfits every episode. Belinda and her patterns, banger every time. The 3 pool ladies and their various swimsuits and what the type of swimsuit they wear says about them and their body image and how they feel about themselves. Killer. Lachlan's little alligator print shirt that he had on at the beginning of this episode, I was like, I would fully wear that.
Mm-hmm.
I would wear that shirt. If Banana Republic was selling the alligator shirt, I would wear it in a heartbeat. But no, Saxon is just, the fact that he's the face of that campaign, I'm like, I get it, because he's like 6'14" and he's very handsome and all of that. But I'm like, did you really know what you were getting when you made him the face of the campaign?
Before we move off this topic, I think I just want to mention or just point out that, like, yes, this is 3 characters engaging in a threesome, 2 of whom are brothers, and that is deeply upsetting and generally not what we see on television. But I also feel like Mike White is really playing with the line of what the audience is willing to accept, because, like, they had a threesome, there's no doubt about that, but, like, you know, there were other sexual acts that could have been depicted that they chose not to go with, right? And I feel like if they had gone more in that direction, like, it would be so shocking that it would take over the entire discourse. Maybe it will be. Like, we're recording this shortly after the episode aired, so, like, who knows? Maybe this will be what people are talking about forever. But I guess I feel like just the sexual act specifically that was chosen is such that he can, like, walk right up to the line of, like, what will cause people to, like, turn on the show and not cross over it. That's my postulation.
What did I say from the first moment?
Yeah.
Is this Mike White trying to get his show canceled?
Yeah.
And now I'm wondering, as we go into the first 24 hours after this episode airs, I'm like, how many men are about to tell on themselves with how they react to this? Like, by playing it up or down, I'm like, I'm very interested to know how many men are maybe going to reveal something they didn't mean to in the way that they discuss this episode.
How so, Sarah? I don't understand your innuendo there. What do you mean by that? Just say it plainly.
I wonder how many guys would be like, well, haven't you ever? And it's like, no. No.
Who among us hasn't fantasized about having a threesome with their brother?
It just reminds me of, like, when I was in college, I ran into a guy that I went to summer camp with. So I only saw him a few weeks every year for a few years when we were kids, and then ran into each other in college. We're catching up. We're getting to know each other as mostly adults. And some of the shit he said was going on the boys' side of camp. And he's like, what was it like on the girls' side? I was like, well, we were literally painting each other's toenails and braiding each other's hair. That's really all we were up to. When we got a little bit older, we would sneak out and smoke cigarettes, you know, like behind the hell hut. But he was talking about some wild sexual shit happening on the boys' side, just amongst the boys. And I was like, no, the worst thing that we did was, and it was a smallish camp. It's not like there were a big enough cliques that, oh, somebody could have been up to something you didn't know about. It's like, no, you kind of knew it, everybody, except girls' side, boys' side. There wasn't a lot of contact, so they were up to some stuff. And then I was like, we were really just kind of doing sleepover things, and then later we were kind of smoking cigarettes, and that was it.
Well,
and then he was like, "Oh, I thought you were having crazy, like, pillow fights, like they depict in 70s comedies." And I was like, no, that wasn't happening on our side of camp. We were the calm, peaceful side, I guess.
I think what's clear is that, you know, the White Lotus makes clear something we all know, which is that the male sexuality left unchecked can be a
a
Upsetting thing.
monster.
Upsetting
It
thing.
will
Yeah.
play into that emailer's comment about, what will men do? How far will they go to preserve their self-image as a masculine figure? I am like, okay, so what are Saxon and Lachlan about to do to reinforce their self-images? Because this event has stirred up that water. And are they really ready to look in the mirror and realize, like, is Saxon going to go, you know what, I think I need therapy. I think I need to go home and get a therapist and talk some stuff out. Or is he going to double down on the protein bro stuff and just become worse?
We will see. We'll see. But let us know what your thoughts and reactions were to that scene in the comments or at decodingtv@gmail.com. Moving on, speaking of the Ratliffs, Guy Talk successfully retrieves the gun from the Ratliffs' apartment, thus ending the Jacovian threat in Timothy's drawer. He also has his first shooting lesson and secures a date with Mook. I just want to say I love that Guy Talk goes looking for the gun. He sees the sort of chest of drawers, and then first try, it's right there. And you, like, the viewer expects, oh, there's going to be a scene of him rapidly looking through all the things, and but instead it's just nope. First try, he nailed it right away, and that is just a fun way of subverting that trope. I also really enjoyed the fact that when he's walking out, he's staring at the Ratliffs, but they don't look at him, which makes sense because they would not look at, servants basically. And they would never make eye contact with those people. And so I enjoyed that as a character moment as well. But anyway, fun stuff. Also, apparently Guy Talk, not too bad with a gun. So yeah. Any thoughts about the Guy Talk plotline this episode?
It's so stretched out. I mean, it really felt like this is a little bit my issue with the season as a whole. And I think the writing is good and the acting is so good. And so much of the show is it's just a kind of a pleasure to watch. That it's not like I mind that we're kind of treading a little bit of water here and there, but this plot point of the gun going missing and Guy Talk looking for the gun, I'm like, oh my God, why is this taking 2 full hours to get through? I'm like, I would be interested to put the last episode and this episode into an editing software and just cut Guy Talk scenes. I have a feeling it's probably 7-ish minutes total out of 64, 65 minutes of episode. No, it would be 120, 25 minutes of episode. It is just pulled taffy. It is so thin. I'm glad he got the gun back. I'm glad it turns out he's a pretty good shot. Feels like that might be relevant soon. But I also was just like, wow, we really stretched this out. This was really, it kind of says to me that Mike White doesn't really have a lot for these characters to do. And kind of bringing me back to the point of maybe you need a collaborator, because I felt like in the first and second seasons, the staff were much more effectively integrated into the sort of upstairs, downstairs form of the narrative. And this season, it feels very upstairs heavy, especially because Belinda is in this work exchange program where she is a staff member, but she's indulging in the same sort of experiences. She's eating in the dining room with other guests. She's going to the dinners at night with other guests. She's in this kind of strange limbo, liminal space between the two. She feels more upstairs this season because she is out with guests in a way that she wasn't necessarily in the first season. So it just kind of feels like Mike White doesn't really have a lot for Lisa, and I'm very sorry, I cannot pronounce his name, but Taime, the actor. They just don't have a ton to do, and their plot just feels very, very thin, very, very stretched. And that's where it's maybe a Thai collaborator to weigh in on the experience of living in a place. Because these resorts, I mean, there are ways to travel with more ethical intention of not screwing up local economies, but these kinds of resorts really warp the local socioeconomic dynamics. And I feel like we saw a lot of that in Hawaii, and we saw a lot of it in Sicily, where the locals just don't really have good employment opportunity. If they don't want to work for the resort, there's not a lot going on, and thus they become scammers. But this season, I feel like we're not really seeing a good, clear picture of how the White Lotus is messing up the local economy and the local socioeconomic world of at least this island, if not Thailand at large. They talk about it. They talk about like all the shady Americans who come to Thailand to hide because they're in trouble back home. But we're not really seeing the same level of narrative integration. And I feel like this Guy Talk's storyline is a perfect illustration of like, there is not much here. This is very thin. There's not a lot of meat on this bone. And we are just stretching it out to make it feel more important than it really is. Because 2 hours later, we are in the same place. Timothy did not die by suicide. The gun is back in the drawer, and no one is the wiser except Guy Talk and eventually, presumably, Timothy. It just feels like, wow, what was that all? What was that? It was something for Guy Talk to do for 2 hours.
Well, let's hope it pays off in some better way than what you're indicating. But I would agree. I tend to agree with you so far. On a much lighter note, Belinda awakens with Porchai as her son Zion arrives from Hawaii. It's a purely screwball moment of scrambling not to be discovered after having slept with someone. And in a demonstration of the healthiest family dynamic seen on White Lotus, Zion's just happy that his mother is happy, apparently for the first time in a while. Also, Porchai proposes opening a spa together in Thailand. So we'll see if that works out. But anyway, fun moment. It's nice. It's sweet. It's cute. I don't know that we have anything else to say at this point about that. All right. Kate, apparently up early for a phone call from home, sees Valentin leaving Jacqueline's room. This opens 30 years of resentment and anger amongst the friends, hinting at long-established dynamics and behaviors that are not uplifting any of these women. Jacqueline points out that she deals with enough gossip in her life without her friends gossiping about her too. And Jacqueline also has a chance to connect with her husband this episode. We learned that he was on set and his phone died. I don't know if that's true, but whatever.
But it is what she thought. Her initial thought was he must be on set. And then she works herself up into this lather. And then she cheats on him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, Jacqueline, self-fulfilling prophecy.
I gotta say, I wasn't a fan of how Lori conducted herself this episode, the Carrie Coon character. I mean, she broke girl code, first of all, by like telling Jacqueline that like Leslie Bibb's character told her about, like that's not cool. You know what I mean? Like she can ruin her own relationship with Jacqueline, but like then dragging Leslie Bibb's character down with her as well.
I will say, girl code, whatever. Like there's far fewer rules.
There's no girl equivalent of bro code? Is that what you're saying?
I just think in general there's far fewer rules than people think. I will say, Lori was being a bitch, but Jacqueline also did the thing. She was pushing Valentin. She did keep saying to Lori, like, you're single. You should go after him. He's hot. Have a vacation fling. And then she's the one who sleeps with him. And Lori indicates that this has been the dynamic, which I also picked up on earlier was, Jacqueline sleeps with all the boys Lori likes. I think Jacqueline and Lori are very sort of like type A alpha types.
Yeah.
And if they were in separate friend groups, they would each be the leader of their friend group. But being in the same friend group, they're put into conflict with one another. And Kate's kind of caught in the middle. But I will say that type of person that Kate is, the reason I don't like have a ton of sympathy for being outed as the one gossiping is because she was the one gossiping. If Kate was a real one, she would have kept her trap shut. If you want to talk girl code, the real girl code is taking that to the grave. And the fact that, and Kate, if you notice, she gossips with Jacqueline about Lori. She gossips with Lori about Jacqueline. The only time they gossip with each other about Kate is when she more or less admitted to voting for Trump. And quite frankly, the world we live in, everybody would talk shit about that. But they're not really. And you could say, well, it's because she's married and her life seems fairly normal, fairly stable. There's maybe not that much to gossip about. Like Jacqueline's got this Hollywood life. Lori's life is maybe a little bit not working out in the moment. She didn't get a promotion. Her daughter's a little off the rails, whatever. But I do think like the Kate friend, that middle friend, that friend that somehow is always in the center of all the drama, but never the direct cause of the drama, but there's always a lot of drama. That person is sometimes the most toxic in the group. And that's why I'm like, Lori outing her as the one who gossiped, but she gossiped.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and she does, like, she's gossiping about both of them behind their backs.
I am loving the writing in this subplot. Like, just when Jacqueline is confronted, she denies, she deflects, um, because Carrie Coon's character wants to have a real, genuine moment, right? She wants to be like, hey, like, you did the thing. It's okay. Let's talk about it. And Jacqueline is just will not acknowledge the truth of what actually happened. And that strikes me as very believable. So I really, really am loving this subplot. I think it's just beautifully written and acted. All right. Before we get to our final two subplots here in this episode, I want to mention one quick thing, which is that, hey, many people are watching our conversations here on YouTube at youtube.com/@decodingtv. But according to my metrics, a significant portion of you are not subscribed. I would strongly recommend you subscribe. Give us a like if you're enjoying our conversations. You'll get many more conversations in the future. We're covering Severance right now. We're covering Last of Us in the future. We're covering Andor in the future. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube, and you'll get more of these chats as they come along. Sarah Marrs, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
You can find my work online at laineygossip.com or the Substack, The Squawk.
All right. Just a couple of other plot lines this episode. Back in Bangkok, Rick meets with Sritala about his movie, quote unquote, and engages his friend Frank to help him with the ruse by pretending to be a film director. Rick promises the situation will not get messy, so that means it'll probably get messy. The two head to Sritala and Jim's house for their fateful meeting, and Rick promises to not bring a gun. Then he brings a gun. Probably some weird stuff is going to happen, but I'm really excited to see what happens. And it's a little bit maddening that they cut off the episode right before we get to this meeting. Any thoughts on this subplot, Sarah Marrs?
Not so much a thought, but a postulation. Jim is Rick's dad, right? Like, that's what's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the ages of the actors work out. Like, it's just gonna be Jim. Like, when he was retelling, we come in on the moment with Rick
Now,
and Frank where he's told Frank his story.
I have to ask though. I have to ask. Do you know for a fact whether or not that's true?
This is where the screener stopped.
Oh,
I have not seen the last two episodes.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. I thought you'd seen the first 7. I thought you'd seen the first 7. Okay,
no,
all right. Oh, wow.
6. So this is where we're all caught up in the same moments, and I'm just like, when Frank was reacting like, and Frank is Sam Rockwell's character. We learned his name.
Yeah.
That's heavy, man. That's really dark. And Rick is like, I've always thought what this story he has about this man who killed my father and all of these things and ruined my life. I'm like, that's not going to be the truth. Like, that's a story your mom told you, and your world is about to be upended because that's the type of show the White Lotus is. But then I was like, it's going to be that Jim is his dad. that's what
it's going to be a Darth Vader style. In a way, I did kill your dad from a certain point of view. Perhaps I think that's very, very possible. It's either going to be what you said, or it's going to be he didn't actually kill his dad, that there was some other explanation for what happened with his dad.
He's not even going to know who Rick's dad is. If he's not Rick's dad, he's going to have no idea what Rick is talking about.
I think what I'm looking for in the Rick storyline is some reckoning with the idea that Rick is like, this guy ruined my life. And like, Rick's storyline to me this season has felt like he needs to reckon with the fact that, like, ultimately you are more in control of your life than you're letting on, right?
Yes.
Yes. People have had tragedies happen to them and it hasn't ruined their life. And so, like, I'm curious, like, how that's going to reflect on what Rick's journey is this season.
Well, and it feels like that would fit into the idea of sort of self and identity and determinism. Also, I am subplot to that still, like, Chelsea, like, what's the reason? What's going on here? Why is he your soulmate? When she's like, he's my soulmate. I'm like, why? What? Please show me, tell me, whatever. Like, just why? So yeah, no, I do think there's resolution to be had about his sense of self and his identity and how this story ties into. He's clearly blaming this event for his life not turning out in some way.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you can afford the White Lotus. You can afford flights to Bangkok on short notice. Rick, you seem to be doing okay on some level. Like, what has gone so wrong? We know so little about Rick's background. Really, all we know is that he says this man killed my father and that has ruined my life. And that's kind of all we know for sure. Everything else is sort of a big question mark. And I'm like, I'm going to start needing some answers on some of this stuff. And like, yeah, what happens with Jim and his identity and all of that. But also, like, why, Chelsea, are you so devoted to this man who was so mean to you?
We'll see if we get any answers, but we're at 2 episodes left, so I'm not sure. It might be a mystery for the rest of the time. Finally, Gary Gregg is hosting a dinner party, and Belinda is smart enough not to go. But he does invite everyone else, apparently, in the resort. He invites he confronts Chloe, and he says, like, which one of the brothers did you hook up with? And she tells them, I think she tells him both of them, basically, but definitely Saxon. And so they're both invited, and it seems like probably Saxon's going to go. Probably, I don't think Lachlan's going to go because he's at the meditation retreat. Unclear who it's going to be, but I also don't think anyone dies at this thing. Like, it's trying to make it out to be really menacing and threatening, like somebody's going to die. But like the sort of mass shooting that we see in the first episode happens in the morning, so like I'm guessing it's like, unless it's a really long dinner party, I don't think that's the thing that causes the mass death.
It just feels like the setup of a Knives Out movie.
Yeah, perhaps.
It feels like this is the dinner party where somebody dies and they call Benoit Blanc.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it. But I'd be surprised if we even see the dinner party. Like we only have 2 hours left. I don't know that we have, and nobody wants to go. Saxon's the only one who, for some reason, wants to go.
The show is not going to turn down the opportunity to give us an incredibly awkward Gary Gregg, Chloe Saxon dinner. I think we're definitely getting that scene, it's going to be gloriously awkward because I think, you know, Gary Gregg is operating at a level that Saxon aspires to. You know, like Gary Gregg feels like somebody who has no morality whatsoever and is in a lot of control over how he conducts his life in a way that Saxon probably aspires to. That's kind of my feeling, because I think Saxon would be like, "Grr." If the situation was reversed, Saxon would be like, "Grr," you know, the guy needs to get got. But like Gary Gregg is like, "Hey, come to dinner. Let's talk this out." You know, like so I think that'll be an interesting dynamic to watch. But,
yeah, that's true. I will say, like, when they show the shot of Chloe walking out onto the lanai of his villa in the hills above the resort, it is such a spectacular view. And I had this thought of like, this shot is sort of the whole season, the whole theme, because how can you be so miserable when you have this view? But this wealth warps people in a way that makes it almost seemingly impossible for them to enjoy anything. And like, I get it with Timothy because he is aware that at home things are unraveling and his life might be very, very different. And his wife is over here saying, I don't think I can live an uncomfortable life, which is a super, super dark thing to hear your wife say when you know there's a very, very real chance that an uncomfortable life is coming her way. But I saw that view and I was like, every season of the White Lotus, these people are in the most spectacular, and I know that's the whole point of the show. It's the whole inspiration that Mike White had, was people being in these ludicrously beautiful locations and having just the worst time. But I just was like, you have every day you walk out and this is what you see, and you are so miserable you can't even see it. And I'm like, that is depressing. And whatever the line of money is where you stop seeing the world around you, I'm like, that's it, that's the line. Like there is some kind of psychological study that's like, money can't buy happiness, and like, no, up to a point it absolutely does, because it relieves stress, it removes burdens from your daily life. But there is a tipping point where you have so much money and then it becomes this weird otherness. And I'm like, living in that place, having that view and being unhappy is the other. It's too much money. You have so much money, you can't enjoy life. And I'm like, these people are so miserable. and they're in the most beautiful place and they're all so unhappy. And I'm like, whatever that line is, whatever that dollar amount is, just want to be right below it. I never want to see a sight as stunning as the view from Jim's lanai and not take in the moment and not be struck by the beauty of the ocean and the world. And they just, none of them see it. None of them even look at it. Chloe zones right in on Gary Gregg in the pool. Gary Gregg never even looks at the view. They just take it for granted in this way that I'm like, ugh, guillotines for everybody. None of you deserve this.
I don't know. I think I wouldn't go quite that far. I think I agree with you on the Gary Gregg, but I think Chloe definitely recognizes it because she does have this scene where she talks with her friend, right? What's her name? Rick's girlfriend. Chelsea. And Chelsea's like, hey, you can find someone else. And she's like, no, actually, this arrangement is like pretty sweet. Like, I don't think I could get another arrangement this good for a while. And I think when you see the swimming pool and all that stuff, it's really showing you why she sticks around with this guy who kind of sucks. And that's what we're missing. And is a verified murderer, right?
That's what we're missing with Chelsea. We're not seeing what is the view from Rick's, whatever the equivalent of his lanai is, his balcony, his backyard, his porch, whatever. What is that view that's keeping Chelsea around? But I do think, like with Chloe, though, when she says this setup is pretty sweet, I'm not sure she's really thinking about that view. I think it's more that he's just very rich and there's a yacht and there's this, and she doesn't have to worry about anything. There's an endless parade of designer swimsuits. But she is afraid of losing it. She's so afraid of losing it. She's literally willing to stay with someone that she fully believes is capable of harming her. And that's its own prison. That's its own trap. And I'm just like, it's the gilded cage. All of these people are in this gilded cage. And I'm just like, none of you deserve this. All of you are so awful and miserable. And you don't even see what's in front of you. You don't even see that view.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.